At 11:23 a.m. on September 14, 2025, a Chinese J-15 fighter pilot made a career-defining mistake. He dropped at 200 feet above the USS John S. McCain in the South China Sea. It was meant to be an intimidating show of force to push the American warship out of disputed waters. Little did he know that his aggressive flyby would trigger one of the most intense naval standoffs in the South China Sea. The McCain is a 9,500-ton Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, packed with some of the most advanced air defense systems on the planet. Her crew had spent 18 months training for exactly this kind of situation in contested waters. They'd dealt with aggressive Chinese aircraft before, but this time was different. Inside the Combat Information Center, the crew tracked the J-15 across multiple systems simultaneously. The radar had been watching the fighter since it launched from the Liaoning aircraft carrier 87 miles away. Pretty standard stuff. Chinese carriers regularly send planes to shadow American ships in these waters. Usually, the pilots keep their distance. At 11:25 a.m., the J-15 made a second pass, dropping to 150 feet. The pilot rolled upside down directly above the McCain's forward deck. He was close enough that sailors on deck could see his helmet through the canopy. The jet wash from his engines rattled equipment and knocked over a toolbox. This wasn't professional shadowing anymore. This was straight-up harassment. The McCain's captain had been on the bridge for 6 hours, watching the Chinese get more aggressive. 3 People's Liberation Army Navy ships had been following the destroyer since 6 a.m. A Type 052D destroyer stayed 800 meters to the east. 2 frigates boxed them in from the north and south. Now a fighter jet was playing chicken with his ship. Things were getting out of hand fast, and he was getting really pissed. At 11:27 a.m., the J-15 made a third pass, dropping to 100 feet and crossing right in front of the McCain's bow. The pilot's message was crystal clear: back off, turn around, get out of what China considers its waters. These pressure tactics had worked on other ships before. But McCain wasn't backing down, and her captain had had enough. The destroyer's defense systems had been tracking the J-15 with multiple sensors since the first pass. The radar had a constant lock. Fire control systems calculated targeting solutions every third of a second. 2 SM-2 surface-to-air missiles sat ready in their launch tubes, waiting for an authorization that hopefully would never come. The captain made his move. If the Chinese pilot wanted to play dangerous games, he was about to find out just how dangerous things could get. At 11:28 a.m., the McCain's fire control radar switched from passive tracking to active targeting mode. The change was subtle but unmistakable to anyone monitoring radar. The destroyer had just locked weapons-grade targeting radar onto the J-15, the electronic version of pointing a gun at someone's head. Inside the Chinese jet, every alarm went off at once. The radar warning receiver went off. The missile warning system lit up. The heads-up display flashed red everywhere. The pilot went from harassing an American ship to being actively targeted by one of the world's deadliest air defense systems in under 2 seconds. The J-15 pilot's training took over immediately. He yanked the stick hard right, dumping chaff and flares while climbing away at full throttle. The aggressive passes stopped instantly. The fighter climbed to 800 feet and put 5 miles between himself and the destroyer in 45 seconds flat. Suddenly, keeping a safe distance seemed way more important than buzzing American warships. But it wasn't over. At 11:31 a.m., the Chinese destroyer 800 meters away fired up its own targeting systems. The electronic warfare had just gone from one-sided to mutual. Both destroyers now had each other in their crosshairs, weapons ready to fire in milliseconds. The South China Sea had just gotten a whole lot more dangerous. 2 modern warships, each packing enough firepower to sink the other several times over, were facing off with active weapon locks. One mistake, misread signal, or one nervous weapons officer, and this would go from warning to actual shooting. The McCain's electronic warfare systems immediately picked up the Chinese targeting radar. Countermeasures kicked in automatically. The ship's jamming systems started broadcasting interference across multiple frequencies, not enough to completely blind the Chinese radar, but enough to mess with their accuracy. The message was clear: if you're going to target us, we'll make you work for it. At 11:33 a.m., things reached maximum tension. The J-15 had circled back but stayed a much more respectful 4 miles away. The Chinese destroyer kept its targeting lock active. The McCain stayed on course at 15 knots, her defense systems tracking every threat at once. The standoff lasted 7 minutes. Both sides had shown what they could do. Both sides had proven they were willing to escalate. Now came the hardest part, backing down without looking weak. Face matters in international naval standoffs, especially in disputed waters where both sides claim they're in the right. At 11:40 a.m., the Chinese made the first move to de-escalate. The J-15 turned northeast, climbed to 12,000 feet, and increased distance to 10 miles. Still within sight, still watching, but not harassing anymore. The pilot had gotten new orders from his carrier group commander. Point made. No reason to push it further. The McCain's captain waited 90 seconds before responding. At 11:41 a.m., he ordered the fire control radar back to passive tracking. The targeting lock disengaged, but the radar kept monitoring everyone. The American destroyer stayed on course at the same speed. No course change, no recognition of Chinese territorial claims. The freedom of navigation operation would continue as planned. The Chinese destroyer kept its targeting lock for another 3 minutes, one final show that they could match American capability. At 11:44 a.m., their fire control radar switched back to search mode. The standoff was over. Both sides had demonstrated their capabilities without firing a shot. Both sides could claim they hadn't backed down. Both sides could tell their commanders they'd defended national interests. By noon, things had returned to normal in the South China Sea. The J-15 kept a 12-mile separation, circling lazily overhead. The Chinese destroyer and frigates followed the McCain's course at 800 meters, close enough to watch, far enough to avoid another escalation. The electronic warfare stopped. The immediate crisis had passed. The McCain continued its freedom of navigation operation for another 6 hours before heading toward international waters. The Chinese ships followed for 4 hours, then broke off to return to their patrol areas. The J-15 landed back on the Liaoning at 1:47 p.m. The pilot's debriefing probably included some tough questions about the wisdom of harassing American destroyers. 48 hours after the incident, the two governments issued carefully drafted statements. The Americans asserted their right to operate in international waters. The Chinese protested illegal intrusions into their territorial seas. Neither side mentioned the targeting locks, the radar painting, or how close things had come to actual combat. Some things are better left to classified reports and private diplomatic conversations. The engagement data from the McCain was transmitted to Pacific Fleet headquarters within 2 hours. Intelligence analysts studied every second of the encounter. The Chinese radar signatures, jamming capabilities, and response times were all analyzed and added to the threat database. The J-15's flight characteristics and the pilot's reaction time were noted and filed for future reference. Similar analysis was definitely happening in Beijing. The McCain's response times, radar capabilities, and electronic warfare systems had all been on full display. But little do they know, that was just one out of the countless U.S. defense systems. Using the same information blindly for another mission may lead to the same type of embarrassment they faced on the 14th of September. The incident showed just how thin the line is between routine operations and actual combat in the South China Sea. A Chinese pilot pushed too hard, got locked up by targeting radar, and learned that American destroyers don't scare easily. The lesson cost nothing more than some embarrassment and heightened tensions, but the humiliation fell on the side that started it, and still backed out first. That will not be forgotten easily.